There are 7 red flags that you need to know if you're a freelancer that are making clients run away from you and ghost you. And if you can just avoid doing these 7 things, you're gonna massively increase your chances of signing clients on Upwork. Like Jacob, who earned $8,000 in just 6 weeks on Upwork with my help. Like Mohammed, who signed his first ever client on Upwork. And like JD, who's earned nearly $10,000 on Upwork since joining our community. Now, I'm in a really unique scenario, because in addition to signing dozens and dozens and dozens of clients on Upwork and scaling my Upwork agency to $15,000 per month, I've also spent over $40,000 hiring my employees and my contractors on Upwork. And so I've seen this both as the client and as the freelancer/agency. Now, red flag number 1 is slow response times, because clients on Upwork typically need things done quickly. And not only is this a huge red flag if you're taking 12, 14, 16 hours to reply to clients, not only is it a red flag, but it also puts you at a massive, massive disadvantage for signing any of these clients. Because typically, when a client goes on Upwork and posts a job, they're gonna review proposals and they're gonna send a couple different freelancers messages. And if a couple different freelancers reply immediately, but you take 16 hours to reply, well, who do you think has the better chance of signing that client? It's obviously the people who are applying immediately, right? Because they're gonna reply to that client, they're gonna go back and forth with that client, they might set up a call with that client, and they might even do a deal before you even reply. Now, if you're consistently taking a really long time to reply to clients, you're taking 12 hours, 14 hours, 16 hours to get back to clients, it signals to them that you don't really care about that job. And if you don't care about the job, they're probably not gonna give it to you. And quick, clear communication is something that is super, super important to clients. And I can tell you, because me, as a client, it's one of the few things that I look for when I'm hiring people, right? They need to be extremely quick and clear communicators with me. And if they're not being a quick communicator the first or the second time I send them a message, well, then my guess is that even after I hire them, they're probably not gonna be a very good communicator or a quick communicator then as well. And so this is a huge, huge red flag. Now, on the flip side, if you can be a really, really quick communicator, it gives you a massive, massive advantage over tons of other freelancers. And I can share a quick story, from me as a client with this. And so I was hiring probably 2 months ago an ad creative designer. And I sent out messages to 3 or 4 different ad creative designers who I had found on Upwork. Now, one of them replied immediately. We went back and forth with him. I checked out examples of his work. He gave me a quote for how much it would cost. And we were able to do the full deal, right? I sent him a contract within about 15 minutes. Now, that was before almost all of the other people had even replied to my message. And so if you can be really quick, right, with your response time, it gives you such a massive advantage, especially if you're offering services that are like graphic design or video editing, or services that might be smaller in price, right? Now, the way to fix this is actually pretty simple. All you need to do is download the Upwork app on your phone and turn on notifications. And then as soon as somebody messages you, you wanna be instant to reply, right? Because the sooner you reply, the better the chance you have of actually signing that client. Now, red flag number 2 is being a bad communicator. And note, this is different than red flag number 1, which is being basically a slow communicator or having a slow response time. And the difference is, with red flag number 2, being a bad communicator, this is things like, having tons of spelling errors in your writing, having lots of grammatical mistakes. Right? If you can't clearly articulate the ideas in your head to the other person via a message, then obviously it's gonna be really, really, really tough for clients to wanna hire you because they can't even communicate with you, right? And so this is something that I see, most commonly if people, maybe English is your second language, then you need to learn English really well. And if you're not comfortable with that, if you're not, maybe you know English all right, then you wanna make sure you have like Grammarly installed, and you wanna make sure that someone else, whether it's like AI, like ChatGPT or Grammarly, is proofreading your writing and your messages before you send them to the clients. Because again, if you're sending clients messages with tons of errors in them, it's a huge red flag because clients aren't gonna understand you, right? And they're not gonna wanna work with you if they can't understand you. So I know this is a very, very basic one, but it is something that's really important to make sure you have down. Now, another thing that I would rope into like being a bad communicator, right? Other red flags that fall under this category, like if you're being rude to clients, if you're demanding that they pay you more, if you're saying, you need to pay me more, like, again, there's ways to do this the right way. Obviously, you can ask for raises, but if you're being rude to people, if you're making demands to people, all of this is a huge red flag. And so just use common sense, right? Now, obviously, this should be a no-brainer, but this is all stuff that I've dealt with as a client. Right? I've had freelancers be rude to me. I've had people demand they get paid more and shout at me and stuff like that. Like, this all happens. So if you can just avoid doing this simple stuff, then you'll be in really, really good shape. All right, so that is red flag number 2, is just being a really bad communicator. Now moving on to red flag number 3, which is submitting copy and paste proposals with no personalization. Now, this is a huge red flag for me. And I, as a client, have dealt with this a ton. And a side note, as a freelancer, when I first started on Upwork, this is what I was doing. I was submitting copy and paste proposals with no personalization. And it didn't work, right? I submitted hundreds of proposals and was completely failing. And I was failing until I changed the way I submitted proposals and I started actually personalizing them a lot. Now, to illustrate this point further, I went into my client account and I pulled out one of the proposals that I've gotten that is completely copy and paste. And so I posted a job looking for a content writer to hire so that they could help us write introductions for some of our clients. And you can see this is one of the proposals that I got. I'm applying with interest regarding your open position for a content writer. As you'll see from my resume, I have written and or worked for large retail, stock photography, online photo editing, and cloud-based video editing companies. I'm knowledgeable in SEO guidelines, blog writing, email marketing, or email campaigns, B2B and B2C copywriting, and the associated copy editing duties required for these roles. Now, nowhere in my job post do I mention SEO, blog writing, or email campaigns. So this is very clearly just copied and pasted. And then they say, specifically, my work with PicMonkey and Shutterstock Inc., WeVideo, and Zappos involved writing and managing website copy, writing and managing email content, building landing pages and blogs using WordPress and Contentful, and optimizing traffic. And again, you get the idea. This just goes on and on and on. None of this is personalized. I don't say anything about website copy, right? Blogs, email marketing, none of that. No landing pages were mentioned in my job description. And so if you are submitting copy and paste proposals, the chances are that clients are just going to completely disregard them. Like, as soon as I opened that up, I was not interested at all in that person. I didn't even click on their profile, right? I was immediately not interested and I disregarded their proposal. And so if you are submitting copy and paste proposals, you might be wondering, well, how do I fix this, right? What do I do? Well, the best way to submit proposals on Upwork is to simply develop a template for each service you offer. And then here's the thing, you're still gonna personalize the proposals, but then you'll have a base template to go off of, so you don't have to write an entire proposal from scratch every single time, right? I'll give you an example of this. If you offer SEO, then you could have one proposal template that talks all about on-page SEO. And you would use that template to apply to on-page SEO jobs. And that way, your entire proposal is still extremely relevant because in that proposal template, you're just gonna talk all about on-page SEO, and you're only gonna use it for jobs that need someone to help with on-page SEO, right? So very, very relevant still. And then when you submit that proposal, you're gonna personalize the first 1 to 3 sentences, right? And you're gonna use details based on that job description, right? And so that's where the personalization is gonna come from, but the entire proposal is gonna be very, very relevant. So if you do offer SEO, you can have one template for on-page SEO, one for off-page SEO, one for blog writing, maybe one for link building. So that's how you can submit proposals on Upwork without having to write an entire proposal from scratch every single time and avoiding red flag number 3, which is submitting copy and paste proposals. Red flag number 4 is not having a completed profile. Now, the purpose of your Upwork profile is to simply build trust with clients. And more specifically, you want to build up enough trust with the client so that they send you a message on Upwork, right? That is the entire purpose of your profile. And so if you don't have your entire profile completed, if your profile looks like this, right, but you can see is pretty empty, then that's a huge red flag for me as a client. Because again, part of the way, the purpose is to build trust, and part of the way you build trust is by providing an abundance of information about you, your services, your experience delivering the services, and all of that fun stuff, right? And an especially important part of this, if you offer graphic design or video editing or a visual service, is your portfolio. So that's another kind of red flag that's roped into the same category. If you offer video editing, but I click on your portfolio and there is only one example of your work, or there's no examples of your work, that's a big red flag for me, right? I wanna make sure if I'm hiring you to edit videos, that you have lots of examples of videos you've edited that look like my style, right? If I'm hiring you, you should have examples of your work that look like the stuff I want. And if you only have one example of your work, well, then you're probably not gonna be aligned with my style. Whereas if you have 6 different portfolio sections set up and they each have 10 examples of videos you've edited, then your chances of signing me as a client, again, gonna go way up. And so this applies really to your entire profile. You wanna make sure you have every single section of your entire profile filled out and completed. So when someone clicks on your profile, they actually get tons of information. They get all the information they would possibly need to want to send you a message. And this is one of those things that's such an easy thing to fix, right? You can take an hour or 2 hours or even 3 hours, spend time really perfecting your profile. We have an entire another video on my YouTube channel that goes really in depth on profile optimization, so definitely check that out. But spend 2 or 3 hours optimizing your profile. You only have to do this once, right? You only have to do it once, so it's a very high leverage activity. You do it once, and then for the rest of your life, anyone who's ever on your Upwork profile is gonna be really impressed. And yes, obviously you update it as you continue to sign more clients and get more accolades and get more experience, but for the most part, you just have to spend the big chunk of time once optimizing your profile, and you'll get the benefit forever. Red flag number 5 is having a bunch of bad reviews on your profile. Now, even if you have a lot of good reviews, right, if you have maybe 20 5-star reviews, but you have 5 reviews that are 1 stars, that's still a huge red flag for me as a client, right? And so in this little section, I'm gonna show you how to avoid getting bad reviews. And there's a couple different ways that we're gonna do that. I'll break that down in a second here. But also if you get a bad review, how to try and change it. And if you can't change it, right, if you can't get the client to take it down, then how to deal with it and how to mitigate and how to lower the effect that it has on your profile. Now, I have to admit, I myself have never dealt with this because I've never gotten a bad review on Upwork. It just hasn't happened for me. But I've helped multiple members of our premium Upwork community who have gotten bad reviews talk to their clients and basically get their clients to remove the bad review. And so I do have experience helping other people successfully do this. Now, the best way to avoid getting bad reviews is simply to avoid getting stuck with bad clients, right? And so the easiest way you could possibly do this is when you're applying to jobs on Upwork, you're gonna see that each client has a little 5-star rating, right? It's a rating out of 5 stars. This is basically the client's equivalent to like a job success score, right? Now, I don't apply to any jobs who are posted from clients that have less than a 3-star total accumulative review, right? If the client has 20 reviews and their total is 2.5 stars, I'm not applying to that job. Because again, the client's probably gonna be really difficult to deal with. They're probably gonna be more inclined to leave me a bad review. So I don't want anything to do with them, right? There's plenty of clients on Upwork who have 5-star reviews in total who would be happy to hire me instead of this guy who's got a 2.5, right? That's the easiest way. Now, if you do get caught with a bad client and they do end up leaving you a bad review, the first step is to try and get them to take it down. Now, for me, I ask if it's like a smaller project, maybe it was like $300 or $200 or $100, I would just ask the client if they want a full refund in exchange for them taking down that review. Now, when I ask them this, I would also massively apologize for whatever they think that I did wrong. And this is the key. Even if you don't think you did anything wrong, still apologize. Because in the end, nobody cares, right? If you can just push your ego to the side, make the apology to the client, say, hey, Mr. Client, I'm super sorry. I had no idea that you were looking for this or whatever. Really sorry, you're obviously disappointed with my work. I'm happy to give you a full refund, and I would really appreciate it if you could take down that bad review, as it makes it really hard for me to get future clients and support my family, right? Something like that tends to work pretty well. Now, if they're still refusing to take down that bad review, if they say, no, I don't want a refund, I think you're horrible and I'm not gonna take down the bad review, then the next step is to simply reply to that review. Now you can see when somebody leaves you a review, whether it's a good review, a 5-star review, or a 1-star, a bad review, you get the opportunity as the freelancer to reply to that review. And basically what you wanna do is if someone leaves you a 1-star review, you wanna reply to it and give everybody else context, right? Because at this point, you've already asked them to take down the review in exchange for a refund. They've said no. And so you can you don't wanna be making fun of them. You don't want to be like, but you can tell the world both, you can tell the world your side of the story, if that makes sense, right? And so that's what you should do. If the client was rude, if the client ghosted you for 2 weeks, right, you would say that in the response. You would say, hey, Mr. Client, really sorry that you had a bad experience working with me. You disappeared on me for over 2 weeks. And so, all right, you can kind of like tell your side of the story, kind of explain things. And again, you don't want to be attacking them. You don't want to be rude, but you just want to simply explain your side of the story. And the benefit of this is that anytime somebody else, another client, is on your profile, they get to see, oh, some client left you a 1-star review, but you responded really professionally explaining that maybe that client was horrible, right? Maybe they did ghost you for a month and then they randomly came back and got really, really mad or something weird, right? But you get to explain your side of the story. And so another client viewing your profile can say, oh, okay, that makes sense. You know, this freelancer probably got stuck with a bad client. I can see they have a lot of other good reviews, so, you know, it's not as big of a deal. Now, the other consideration to make when it comes to like dealing with bad reviews is just making sure that you're getting lots and lots of good reviews from all your other clients. Because if I click on your profile, if I'm a client, and I click on your profile, and I see you have 5,000 5-star reviews, and I see you have like 20 1-star reviews, well, it's not that big of a deal because I can see you obviously do a very, very good job for the vast majority of your clients. Right? And so just making sure that you are getting lots of consistent reviews, and I have a separate video on my channel. It's like a 5-minute tutorial on how to do that. Making sure you're getting lots of reviews is gonna be really important. Now for red flag number 6, we have interview mistakes. Now, there's so many of these, but I just bunched them all together into the category of making mistakes when the client is interviewing you. All right, and so some of the most common mistakes in terms of just like your presentation is like having a really noisy background. If there's noises going on in the background, kind of a red flag. It's a little bit weird. It's weird, right? If you have not taken the time to brush your hair, if you're wearing like a sloppy shirt, right? If you don't look like you are, if you don't have a professional look to you, right? It's a red flag. Other red flags are if you have like bad lighting on your face. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a red flag, but it's definitely a subtractor from the interview, right? If the client can't clearly see you, it's kind of a red flag, right? Other things would be like if you answer questions very vaguely, that's definitely a red flag. If you're really, really difficult to understand, that's a red flag. And overall, if you just seem like you're completely unprepared for the interview, that is yet another huge red flag. And so now that you know those are the core interview red flags, now I'm gonna give you a checklist so make sure that you don't run into any of those. So number 1, you wanna make sure that you brush your hair, look in the mirror, have a nice shirt on, right? Have a professional look to you. Number 2, you wanna make sure you have good lighting on your face. Number 3, you wanna make sure you have a plain or a professional looking background, right? You can see this isn't a plain background, but it's fairly professional, right? It looks nice. There's nothing like, there's not a bunch of clutter in the background. There's not a bunch of stuff, right? It looks decent. And then outside of that, just make sure to take the interview in a room alone, right? Don't take it in a room with tons of people with tons of background noise. And I know these probably seem pretty obvious, but all of these things I have encountered when interviewing people as a client, right? And so it does happen. And if you can just avoid these things, your interviews should go pretty well, right? And the other things on this checklist are, number 1, prepare if you can, right? If you know the company's name, then Google them, right? Do some research on them. What's the company? What's their mission? How do they make money? Like actually understanding the fundamentals of their business and preparing for the call by learning about their business is a huge green flag, right? So the red flag with this is if you look completely unprepared. On the opposite side, if you are super prepared and you know a bunch of different things about their company and you talk to them on the interview about the things you've learned about their company, huge green flag. Like that's happened to me a couple times as a client, and that's something that I do almost every single interview I have as the freelancer/agency, and it works super, super well. And last but certainly not least, is just make sure you're speaking really, really clearly and make sure you are giving them specific answers, right? Now the red flag version of this is if you're giving them really, really vague answers and if you're not speaking clearly at all. And the reason that this is a red flag for clients is because if you're giving really, really vague answers, it almost kind of seems like you're hiding something, right? And obviously that's not the vibe you want to give off, right? And then obviously if people can't understand you, they're probably not going to hire you, all right? And so that is the main core kind of red flags when it comes to the interview. And if you can avoid those and follow our checklist to make sure you do avoid the red flags, you'll have a much, much better chance of closing the client after that interview. Now, red flag number 7 is not having a lot of availability. Now, for me as a client, if I send a freelancer a message and I'm asking them to set up a call, and they send me back a message, with their availability, and it's only like a couple hours each day, and none of those hours are, in my time zone when I'm gonna be awake, then I might not actually book a meeting with that freelancer. And that freelancer just lost a very good opportunity to sign me as a client, right? And so basically, there is a direct correlation between how much availability you have on your calendar and how many meetings you will get booked from clients. Because like I just said, if the client doesn't see any availability, the likelihood that they actually book a meeting is very low. And yes, if you are working and submitting lots of proposals to international companies, right? So for example, if you are located in Pakistan and you're submitting lots of proposals to jobs that are based in the US or Canada or the UK, well, for me, on Eastern time in the US, I'm 10 hours behind PKT, which is Pakistan Standard Time. And so if you are in Pakistan, you'll probably, or it's in your best interest, to adjust your hours so that people in the US, the UK, and Canada have some availability to actually book calls with you, right? Because obviously if your only availability on your calendar is midnight to 4 a.m. for Eastern time, then me as a client, I'm probably not gonna book a meeting with you. Whereas if I click on your calendar and I see your availability is from 8 a.m. Eastern time till 8 p.m. Eastern time, well then I'm very likely to book a call with you because there is tons of availability. There's tons of times in your calendar that I'm gonna be awake. And so obviously those are two very extreme examples, but just making sure that you have set up your Upwork calendar correctly, and I'll show you how to do that in a second, and making sure that you have the correct availability in there and that you have availability when your potential clients are actually gonna want to book calls with you. Another thing that you wanna make sure to avoid when trying to book calls with clients is going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth with the clients, trying to find a time that you're both free for the call, right? Now, I was just on our weekly Q&A for our premium community, and we were talking about this, and so this is very, very top of mind for me. And what I told them, and what I'll tell you, is the easiest way to do this is just to set up the little Upwork calendar. And so if you go to a chat with a client and you see in the top right corner, there's this little calendar button. If you click on that, you can attach your Google Calendar or your Microsoft Calendar to Upwork. You can set your availability, like we were just talking about, and then you can send basically a link through Upwork's interface for the client to book a call with you. Now this is not, obviously doesn't break any of Upwork's terms of service, and it's gonna be way, way easier if a client sends you a message and just says, hey John, I'd love to hop on a call with you. What time are you free? You could say, hey Mr. Client, thanks so much for sending me a message. Here's a link to my calendar. Feel free to book a time that works best for you here. That way, you don't have to go back and forth and back and forth. Because if you say, hey John, I'm free on Thursday at 1 p.m., does that work for you? And the client says, no, that doesn't work for me, right? You get the idea. Like, there's gonna be a lot more back and forth. Whereas if you just send them the calendar link, and to be clear, this is not an external calendar link. This is something you set up on Upwork. Or if you send them the Upwork calendar link, they can just choose a time that works best for you, or works best for them. And as long as you have set up the calendar correctly and you have lots of availability, like we just talked about, this is gonna really, really help you book in more and more meetings. And if you're booking more meetings, you're gonna close more clients. And with that being said, that's all we've got for today's video, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. If you did, make sure to hit the subscribe button. It really helps out the channel. And I'm posting videos every single week all about my journey on Upwork. And now I've helped hundreds of freelancers and agencies sign high-paying clients on Upwork. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.